Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. I hope you're having a fantastic evening. Today, we're going to be discussing 3 cash game lessons. I already see a lot of you are here, so that is fantastic. If you're not watching this live, well, make sure you get on my email list so you can watch it live next time. We will have a short question and answer segment at the end of this webinar, so make sure you hang around until the end and I will answer a few questions. But first, let's discuss 3 cash game lessons. You all have asked me for more and more cash game content recently because, let's be serious. It's a great way to grind up a bankroll from almost no money. All you really have to do is find a game that you can beat and play it a ton, right? There's way less variance in cash games compared to tournaments. And it's better for a lot of people's life, right? I mean, a lot of people can't sit there and play poker all day in a tournament. And cash games allow you to get in, get out, make some hourly rate. If you're good, maybe 10 big blinds per hour, which at 2.5 is $50 an hour, or 5.10 is $100 an hour, right? And cash games are great for people who have other stuff going on in their life and they can't devote long stretches of time to specifically sitting and playing poker. So anyway, let's discuss 3 cash game lessons that you simply must master. So the first is to not be afraid to value bet. If you find that you are very often letting it go check and your opponent has a pretty good hand, well, that you beat, right? And that probably means you're not value betting often enough. Most players play much too straightforwardly in cash games. And when I'm referring to these cash games, I'm referring to either relatively small stakes online, maybe up to like 25 cent, 50 cent no limit, or up to perhaps like 5-10 live. You will find that very often the online games are significantly more difficult than the live games, and that's just generally because you play many more hands online, so the bad players go broke faster, and the good players get better faster. And you're going to find that for the most part, unless you're playing very high stakes games, most players just play really, really straightforwardly. When they raise, they tend to have a premium hand or a draw, and when they call, they tend to have something that's not a premium hand or a draw, which means it's a marginal made hand or a junky draw, perhaps. So when your opponent calls, when you're value betting, you should continue value betting with hands that beat most of your opponent's marginal made hands. And perhaps even more importantly, when your opponent raises you, you need to be making snug folds. So let's take a look at a classic spot that comes up on a very regular basis. Here we are playing 1-2 no limit. Everyone folds to us with King 9 offsuit. I do understand that in many games there are limpers, and I discussed that thoroughly in my cash game masterclass, which we're going to be discussing in a little bit. But anyway, in this scenario, everyone folds to you on the button. You raise to $7, and a straightforward player calls. Flop comes King 10-5, 2 hearts. The opponent checks. So in this scenario, I think most people will value bet here. Most people with top pair think, all right, top pair's pretty good. Let's get some money in the pot, which is the right thought process. So pot is currently $15. In this scenario, you don't want to bet too big unless your opponent is known to be an extreme calling station. Because in this spot, like let's say you bet $15, which is what you see a lot of recreational players do. They essentially force their opponent to only continue with like a really good 10 or better. And if you think about a really good 10 or better, well, that's going to be what? Ace 10, maybe Queen 10, but then also the kings, right? And of course, I understand that's not actually that many combinations of hands, so you are picking up the pot, but the idea of picking up the pot when you have your opponent in bad shape, like when your opponent has something like 6-5, is not really ideal. You want your opponent calling. You are value betting, right? So we bet $8, the opponent calls, turns to 6, the opponent checks. Now, this is a scenario where I think a lot of people start to check. They think, well, if I bet here and get called, I'm pretty unhappy. Or if I bet and get raised, I'm really unhappy. And it's true. When you bet and get raised, you actually are unhappy and you should fold against most straightforward players. However, you should still continue value betting, and your sizing is very important. Notice the pot's $31 here. If you bet something like 25, like you'll see a lot of players do, that's not a very good bet size because people start folding out many of the hands that you're trying to get called by, like a 10. So you want to make sure you make a bet that can still get called by worse hands. So right here we bet 14, opponent calls, river's a 2, the opponent checks. And now this is where a lot of people check behind. And remember, so far, if our opponent is straightforward, right, they will check raise us with perhaps king, queen, or better on the flop, because top pair second kicker is a really good hand. And they'll check raise with all hands better than that, which means they have either king jack, king nine, a weaker king, a 10, a 5. Maybe they have 6-5, but a lot of people check raise with 6-5 on the turn or lead with it. Or like what? King 2. So we pretty much have the best hand in this scenario almost every time. So if we have the best hand almost every time, why are we not value betting? Well, a lot of people think, well, if I bet here, my opponent's going to fold most of the hands worse than mine. And that's true if you bet big. So in this scenario, especially against a relatively straightforward player, you do not want to bet big. You want to make a bet that can get called by many worse hands, and primarily a 10, right? We are trying to figure out a bet that a 10 can call. And in this spot, it's going to be about $20. You're going to find that some people may even hero call you with a hand like ace jack if they decided to not 3-bet at preflop because they call the relatively small flop bet with a gut shot and overcards. They call the turn bet. And then for a third pot on the river, some people will convince themselves that, hey, maybe you're bluffing with a heart draw, which, maybe you would. To be fair, though, if your opponent is straightforward and we had a heart draw here, we'd probably be betting bigger on the flop and the turn and blasting the river. Because then, if you think about this, if their whole range is king, jack, and worse, besides a random lucky king 2 that made 2 pair, your opponent will fold almost that entire range to a big river bet. So if you bet larger on the flop, larger on the turn, and then big on the river, now you just win the pot almost every time when you have a draw. So we're now extracting value, like we're doing right here, with our, pretty strong but marginal made hands. And we are winning the pot with our bluffs a large portion of the time. Now, some people look at this and say, well, sometimes they call a king jack and I lose. Yes, that is true, but understand the vast majority of the time they're going to have worse than king jack. So here we bet $20 and the opponent calls with queen 10, not shocking. This is exactly what we are trying to have happen. And this is how it's going to go down a lot of the time. So you may ask in this scenario, should you be value betting with a hand like ace 10 on the flop to turn in the river? And I think that becomes a little bit closer because you then do not have the king in your hand, right? When you have a king in your hand, it's more likely your opponent has a 10 because there are 3 10s left in the deck and 2 kings. When you have a 10 in your hand, it's flipped, right? Where now there are 3 kings left and 2 10s. So with a 10, you probably don't want to value bet all 3 streets unless your opponents are super calling stations. If you had a hand like pocket jacks, I think you probably should go ahead and continue value betting. And that's because you can get called by, the kings and the 10s, which are roughly breaking even against or flipping against, right? If they have a king, it's 50-50. That they have a 10. Of course, there are a few more king combinations than 10 combinations. But you also can get called by a 5 and random stuff like pocket 7s that decided to call preflop. So I think you probably should make small value bets just like this with hands like pocket jacks. And that's something almost no one does. And if your opponents really are straightforward and perhaps even check raise the flop with a lot of kings, then the range gets really tilted towards a 10 and, jacks beat pocket 10s. So do not be afraid to get value. But remember, it's very important. If straightforward players raise, make snug folds. And I'm telling you, like in this spot, if we even bet the flop and get raised, it would be a hugely gigantic blunder from a game theory optimal point of view to bet the flop and then fold top pair if you get raised. But especially against the most straightforward players who you will encounter in small and medium stakes cash games, especially live, when they check raise you here, they either have a really good draw, which you're roughly flipping against, or a really good made hand, which is going to be legitimately 2 pair and better, which you're dead against. So either you are slightly flipping, or basically flipping, or you're nearly dead, and that's not where you want to be. Of course, some players who are, quote-unquote straightforward will check raise all top pairs. In that case, it gets a little bit more dicey, because then your opponent may be overvaluing some portion of the time. So that's lesson number 1. Don't be afraid to value bet. Mike says his problem is figuring out if the problem is trying to figure out if your opponent is straightforward. Yeah, I mean, that's something you have to be very, very aware of, right? You have to make sure that you are very, very clearly paying attention to what your opponents are doing. And if you don't know what your opponents are doing, you have to assume that they are playing like the rest of the player pool, or players who generally appear like them. And, sometimes you make an assessment, it's going to be wrong. For the most part, you don't want to assume your opponent's a perfect game theory optimal robot, right? Instead, you want to assume your opponents are going to make common mistakes that people in your games make based on generalizations. Mark gives some good advice here. He says, watch all the showdowns. There's a lot of information that comes from these, right? Like say someone opens under the gun and they show up with ace-7 offsuit. Well, that's pretty telling, right? Or say they raise on the button and they show up with 6-2 offsuit. That's also very telling. So all that kind of thing is, all those things are very, very relevant. Make sure you're getting all the information you can. And what a lot of people do wrong is they sit and play on their phone the whole time and they don't get any information and they don't know what to do in spots like this. And that is a big, big mistake. Understand that when you go to play poker, you are going to play poker. And if you're going to play poker, you should be focusing on the poker. All right, lesson number 2. You need to protect your stack. You have to understand who has the range advantage and the nut advantage. These are 2 very, very important concepts. And if you do not have the range advantage and the nut advantage, you want to be keeping the pot small. If range advantage and nut advantage are new terms to you, well, don't worry. We will be discussing those in depth again in my masterclass. So when your opponent clearly wants to put chips in the pot, you need a premium made hand or a strong draw to continue. And when value raising the river, always consider which hands can call, especially when we're starting to risk large amounts of chips. So let's take a look at another hand here. We have 10-9 of spades, which is a fantastic hand. Facing an under-the-gun raise from a tight aggressive player, we are playing 250 big blinds deep. I know a lot of you asked me for deep stacked cash game content, so I made plenty of it, don't worry. And with a hand like 10-9 of spades, we should pretty much always call. 10-9 of spades flops amazingly well. We are not 3-betting this hand, although I don't actually think it would be the worst play, because if you 3-bet and get 4-bet, you actually can still conceivably continue in position. But you really don't want that, right? You'd much rather just call and see a flop. So in this scenario, we need to be calling with most of our decently strong suited connected hands, but understand that you don't want to go too wide calling here, because if you start calling with too many marginal suited connected type hands, like say you call 8-5 of hearts, for example, then you're going to end up making too many marginal straights and marginal flushes. And you have to be careful, because when 250 big blinds goes on the pot, you're not really loving it if you have the 8-high flush or the second straight if there are no flushes available, right? So you have to be a little bit careful in these spots. We do call 10-9 of spades, though, pretty much every time. We do have pre-flop range charts, by the way. They are completely free. You can find those at pokercoaching.com/charts. If you are a Poker Coaching member, they are under the Tools tab, along with a bunch of other tools that are there for you. If you're not a Poker Coaching member, where you are missing out, you can get a completely free trial. Just go there, sign up, and start learning. All right, so here, we flop a straight draw and a flush draw, which is fantastic. So we face a bet from a tight aggressive player, and you want to ask yourself, what is your opponent's range in this scenario? Well, the opponent raised under the gun and is now continuation betting for almost the size of pot into 3 people. So if you think about that, this is a situation where our opponent has the range advantage and the nut advantage. So who has more pocket kings in the range? Our opponent, clearly, right? Who has more pocket jacks? Well, we could probably have all the jacks. We're probably not 3-betting them, but maybe we do sometimes. So that means our opponent, right? Because our opponent raises all the pocket jacks. Who has more king jack? Well, we probably both have roughly the same number, although maybe we have a few more. But even then, to be fair, if it goes raise under the gun and call, I'm probably not even calling king jack offsuit. I'm just going to fold it, because we want to make sure we're playing hands that can make more nut hands. So king jack is kind of irrelevant. Who has more pocket sixes? We probably both play our pocket sixes. So in this scenario, our opponent has aces. He has ace king, right? We probably don't have those hands. So our opponent has the range advantage and they have the nut advantage. This is a spot where when our opponent's betting into multiple people, we are incentivized to keep the pot small. And in this scenario, I'm really not raising with anything. And you may say, well, wouldn't you want to raise with pocket sixes or pocket jacks? Well, maybe pocket jacks, pocket sixes even is kind of dicey because if a lot of money goes in the pot here, we're not loving it. Because if a lot of money goes into the pot, we're against pocket kings or pocket jacks a lot of the time. So we have to be somewhat cautious in this scenario, which means if we're being cautious with our best hands, we also want to be cautious with our draws. And you want to ask, am I getting the right pot odds to call? Well, we're not getting the right immediate odds, but we're certainly getting implied odds. We're in position. If we do get there with our straight, it's almost certainly good. Flush is probably good. Obviously, it should be clear here. The opponent could have ace queen of spades, maybe all the ace x of spades. So again, we don't want to go nuts raising with draws that are not to the nuts. So in this scenario, even though typically you want to be raising with your draws that cannot win at the showdown, especially when you're not getting such a great price, this is a spot where we have a very easy call. So we are going to call. We go to the turn, and now the opponent bets $50. So kind of the same story, right? In this situation, the opponent's bet twice. The opponent probably has a pretty good hand. I mean, at this point, it's probably, what, king, queen, and better? So how are we doing against king, queen, and better with our range? It's not in very good shape. Again, if you all have studied at in the poker coaching homework challenges, you know here that our opponent's range to bet the flop and bet the turn is probably very good made hands and very good draws. And we just are not in great shape against that. So in this scenario, we either need to be calling or folding, and we're not folding the very, very good draw here. So we call. And again, even though we're not getting amazing immediate odds, it's still fine enough. River's the two of spades. Opponent bets $150. Now, you have to ask, should we raise? Well, this is one of these scenarios where we have the best hand almost every time, right? The problem, though, is that if I raise, what are we going to be getting called by? Take a second, think about it. We're going to get called by all the flushes, clearly. Our opponent may have like 8-7 of spades for a worse flush, but every other flush is going to be better. He probably doesn't have any of the queens because queen 10 and queen 9 are in our hand, right? But then our opponent may have ace queen, ace 8, ace 7, ace 6, ace 5, ace 4, ace 3. So that's 7 combinations of flushes that our opponent could potentially have that will obviously never fold if we raise, right? So what else will our opponent call with? Our opponent could have pocket kings or pocket jacks, right? But there's only 6 combinations of kings and jacks, and if we count sixes, then there's 9 combinations. So right there, we have 7 combinations of hands that our opponent will likely play. And to be fair, you should be playing a lot of the suited aces, if not all the suited aces, when playing very deep stacked. Because when you're very deep stacked, you want to play hands that can make the nuts, and suited aces, turns out they're pretty good at making the nuts, right? So if our opponent has 7 combinations of the suited aces that will always call the shove, and then 6 combinations or 9 combinations of sets that may or may not call the shove, if you average all that out, well, whenever you're value raising, you need to have the best hand 50% of the time when you get called. And it's close here. But I do think some people will find folds with sets. So if your opponent will fold out pocket sixes and maybe even pocket jacks, and I mean, who knows, maybe even pocket kings, we really don't want to be value raising in this scenario because let's say our opponent only calls with kings or jacks. That means there's 7 combinations of nut flushes and then 3 or 6 combinations of sets, which is clearly not enough, right? We need at least 7. Maybe our opponent does have the 8-7 of spades sometimes, which may call the shove, in which case now it's 7 and 7. But even then, you see it's close, right? And we are talking about a large amount of big blinds. And if we had an unlimited bankroll, which ideally you do want to be playing very, very properly bankrolled, if we have an unlimited bankroll, I think raising here is not terrible, right? Especially if your opponent will call off with sets. But it's important to realize that, like, what does our hand look like to our opponent? Our hand looks like a flush if we raise, or maybe like what, a queen 10 bluff? It's not a whole lot of potential bluffing hands if you think about it, because we called the flop and we called the turn. If I had queen 10 of hearts, diamonds, or clubs, I mean, I guess those are my obvious bluffing candidates, right? I guess I could have something like ace queen of clubs, maybe ace 10 of clubs. Not a whole lot else, right? So there really aren't even that many bluffing combinations for me to bluff with. So for that reason, we really just don't need to be value raising with all of our potential bluffing candidates. So for that reason, I think we need to call in this scenario. Also, if you are wondering about bankroll management considerations, check out my bankroll Bible at jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. That will be very beneficial to you and probably enlightening if you don't play very properly bankrolled. Anyway, in this scenario, I think we do need to call because I do think if the opponent is good, they are going to fold out sets. So we call. Brief question about pot odds, someone says. Do you have to have more equity than the pot is offering? Yeah, essentially in this scenario, I'm putting in $150 to win a pot that's going to be a total of $479. So you divide 150 divided by 479, which is, 30%. So you have to say, do I have more than 30% equity with the 10-9 of spades? And the answer is yes. So Eric says, do we raise with nut flushes and queen 10 of spades then? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If we had queen 9 of spades, we raise that one too. But yeah, that's it. I don't think we need to be raising many more flushes. Larry says in his games, people almost never bet here on the river unless they have a flush. So if that's the case, what are we value betting? If our opponent checks this river, I'm going to value bet any flush for sure. I'll value bet any set. And king jack if I have it. So that's it. Sets and king jack. I think that's pretty fine. Please repeat the bankroll URL. jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. All right, let's see. Kyle says you have a lot of math to study. Indeed. All right, so this is a good example of a spot where you need to be protecting your stack, especially when you do not have the range and the nut advantage, as we clearly don't. You may be thinking, as a lot of people do, we don't need to worry about balance at all when we're playing cash games against bad players. But you kind of do, especially if you don't actually know what your opponents are doing wrong. So many poker players are overly egotistical, and they assume that they know what their opponents are doing all the time in all scenarios, and you don't. Sorry, you don't. Hate to burst your bubble. I certainly don't, and most people are completely clueless. Let's see what the opponent actually did have. Opponent had the pocket jacks. So this is actually the fun spot where a lot of people think, oh man, I should have raised because he would have called me. But some people will, some people won't. But even then, there's still not enough combinations, right? Or there's barely enough combinations. So you're in this weird guessing game where your opponent has to be making some sort of errors in their calling of a 400 big blind or a 200 big blind all in. Don't forget, it's a big all in, right? And a lot of people just aren't. So protect your stack. Next, you need to understand how similar situations differ. Okay? So do not automatically play specific types of hands in the same way every time. For example, sometimes draw should be played aggressively when you have the range or nut advantage, and other times they should be played passively when you do not have the range or the nut advantage. So let's take a look at another hand. If you were asking, should people be check calling sets on the river? Yeah, probably, or betting and then folding if you get raised. Again, jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. All right. Will we play these hands similarly if we were in a tournament? Yeah, pretty much. Cash games and tournaments are very similar. If anything, you need to be a little bit more cautious when it comes to playing big pots, especially making thin-ish bets or optimistic bluffs whenever you are playing a tournament, because if you lose your one buy-in that you have in front of you, you're just out, right? Whereas in a cash game, you can reload. So typically, deep stack cash games and deep stack tournaments play very similarly. It seems like every day. Actually, for this webinar, I sent out that we're having 3 cash game lessons, and someone sent an email back saying, sorry, I only play tournaments. Well, that person has almost no chance to succeed at poker long term because they don't understand that deep stack cash games and deep stack tournaments are essentially the same thing. All right, so let's take a look at 2 hands, similar spots. In this hand, it goes limp, limp, limp. We have queen jack of clubs. So with queen jack of clubs, we can either limp or raise. I think either play is fine. Queen jack of clubs is probably good enough to raise. It depends a lot on the initial limper strategy, actually, because the initial limper, if they're going to be limp re-raising a lot because they're kind of tricky, well, we need to be limping behind. And it's perfectly fine to limp behind. Don't think that you must raise the limpers all the time. That is an egregious error that a lot of people make on a regular basis. They just think, oh, someone limped, I have to raise. And that's not true. So in this scenario, we are probably going to raise, but maybe not. This time we do raise to $14, which I think is fine. Maybe a tiny bit small. Maybe 16 is better, given we are so deep. We get 2 callers, which is often going to happen. Flop comes king, 10, 3, 1 club. Well, you all know me. We're betting our best made hands and draws in essentially all scenarios. This is actually a spot where, even though it is multi-way, it's pretty nice to just continue betting here with almost your whole range, unless you're raising with all sorts of junk preflop, which I'm not. So I like a relatively... if I'm betting my whole range, you need to be using a small bet size because we're essentially betting because we have the range advantage. If we are betting with only our best made hands and draws, we can usually use a slightly bigger bet size. So depending on what strategy we opt to use, we can either bet something like 35 or bet something like 16. And given I know my raising range over limpers is usually just pretty good, then I'm going to use the smaller sizing. That said, this is a pretty decent board to use a big size too, just because it's kind of likely that your opponent's connected. If this was something like king 10 8, I would be betting a little bit bigger. If it was king 10 3 with a flush draw, I'd be betting a little bit bigger. All these things are very, very relevant. And given this board is about as dry as a big card board can be, I think a small size is fine. Only low jack check calls. So when low jack check calls, they probably don't have a whole lot of nut hands. So they're probably going to have a king or worse. Turns to 4, opponent checks. And now, again, who has the range advantage? Who has the nut advantage? I think I still probably have both of them, right? Our opponent's probably not limp calling 10s or kings pre-flop. Our opponent may have king 10s, whereas we do not. Either way, this is certainly a spot where I want to keep betting my best made hands and draws. But I do think I need to check sometimes here. Like, say I have a hand like king jack. I'm not entirely sure we need to continue betting that. What about ace 10 if I have that? Same story. I also don't think I need to be betting that. So I think we are going to be checking sometimes. So for that reason, I think we need to use a more medium size. Like, well, $52 into the $80 pot. I think that's reasonable. Also, we are deep stacked, right? And it's very important to think when we're deep stacked, then we may have someone who's not planning to fold. We want to be using a bigger sizing to just try to maximize value. One general difference that cash game tournaments and our cash game players and tournament players face is that often in tournaments you're using smaller sizings because stacks are shallower, but also because you don't really want to get it all in very often at all. Because when you get it all in, you could just be out, right? Whereas in a cash game, you can always reload. So cash games, especially when deeper stacked, generally leads to slightly larger bet sizes than tournaments. So anyway, in this scenario, we bet 52, opponent calls, river's 4 of clubs, yuck. All right, how do we feel? Well, this is a scenario where you want to ask, do we have some value hands that we would like to bet? And the answer is clearly yes. If we have pocket aces we want to value bet, if we have kings, like ace king, maybe even king queen we want to value bet, if we have king 10 we want to value bet, if we have sets, obviously yes. And do we have some bluffs? Well, at this point, we do. We have the queen jack, right? All the queen jacks that raise preflop want to be bluffing here. I probably would not be raising king jack offsuit preflop, so I may literally only have like 4 combinations of queen jack suited. Then we can maybe have queen 9 suited and jack 9 suited that would like to bluff, so that's 12 combinations of hands. If I had ace jack or ace queen, we'd probably just be checking. By sets, do I mean boats? Yes, I mean sets. Sets or boats. Listen, whenever I'm thinking about hands, I'm not thinking about, oh, there's a pair on the board, so now I have a full house. I'm thinking, what is the hand relative to what the opponent has? Anyway, maybe that's just a lazy vernacular on my part. So anyway, in this scenario, we're definitely betting, and we want to be betting big. Why are we betting big? Because I'm not actually value betting very many hands, right? Like I just said, I'm probably value betting king, queen, or ace, king, and better. And there really just aren't that many combinations of those hands, right? So this is a spot where, especially if I am bluffing, I'm usually going to be using a larger sizing because what am I trying to get my opponent to fold, right? We are trying to get the opponent to fold out a king or worse. And I just told all of you the opponent's range is probably king, jack, or worse. So if the opponent's range is king, jack, or worse, well then we can perhaps make our opponent fold their entire range. It's very important to find spots like this in cash games where even if your opponent is kind of call happy, a lot of people are not just looking to put 100 big blinds in the pot. I mean, we're playing 1-2 no limit here, right? And ask yourself, how often are people just no problem calling off with top pair junky kicker in a spot where the hero could easily have essentially all the better hands, right? Now, of course, you may be against a legitimate calling station. If that's the case, bet the flop and then probably just check down and then only value bet. But then life's easy because if your opponents make egregious errors that are obvious, like, oh, this guy literally never folds ace high on the flop, the turn of the river, even for a $200 river bet, well then just bet with all of your like middle pair and better and print all the money, right? What do we do if the opponent raises us on the turn? Depends on how big he raises, right? If he makes a pot-sized raise, as you're asking, that would be he's putting in 50 and then making 180 on top, so he's making it almost all in. He's putting in like $240, $230. We would fold, right? Because then we're just not getting the right price. If the opponent's going to check shove all in here, though, I can guarantee he's making a gigantic blunder. Because again, who has the range advantage? Who has the nut advantage? Me, not him. So in this scenario, you should be pretty safe when it comes to betting again, because if your opponent does essentially like ever raise here, they're just making a huge mistake. And if people make huge mistakes, then you're just going to print equity. Do we get hero called? We do not. Opponent plays reasonably. We move on with our lives. All right, let's take a look at another similar situation, but not quite the same. Here we have a limp, raise to 10, and then a call. So in the previous hand, it went limp, limp, limp. I raised. Now it goes limp. This player raises. This player calls. Queen 10 suited. We're definitely going to call pre-flop and see a flop. Flop comes. Same flop. Now we have a $30 bet and a $30 call. Well, remember I just told all of you that we had the range advantage in the previous spot and the nut advantage. Here we do not, right? We did not re-raise pre-flop, so we don't have kings and tens. So the best hand we can have here is pocket threes and king 10 suited, right? We're not calling with king 10 offsuit, so we have what? We have 2 combinations of king 10 suited and 3 combinations of threes, so that's 5 combinations of nut hands, and that's it. Compare that to our opponent's aces, kings, tens, ace king, which is quite good, right? Our opponent has a lot more strong hands than we do. So in this scenario, we just don't get to raise. So if we don't get to raise, we really only have one option here, and that is to call. So are we getting okay odds to call? We are, right? We have to put in 30 to win 150 total. Obviously, we could get raised by someone yet to act. If you can look to your left and see these players like lining up a raise, well then clearly just fold, right? But this is a scenario where I don't think you should expect to see raises all that often. And again, if you do, if your opponents are raising this flop a lot with stuff like king 9, well then they're just giving their money away. So we call, turns a 4, and now goes 60 and call. Even if it went 60 and fold, I'm still going to call in this scenario. Our outs are very, very live, right? If we get the ace, that's great, because then if our opponent has pocket aces, they're just never, ever, ever folding. Same thing for ace king, most likely. If we get a 9, I mean, we may not get paid on a 9, but that's fine. So in this scenario, we definitely want to continue calling. Even heads up, like I said, the pot would be a little bit smaller, but it's still good enough. And this is a scenario where I'm really not looking to do a whole lot of bluffing on the river. I think something that a lot of people do wrong is they find themselves on the river. Say our opponent bet 60, only we called, river's a 4, like it's probably going to be, and our opponent checks. I would not even attempt to bluff here, because in this scenario, a lot of people are going to be checking with stuff like king, queen, king, jack, maybe ace, king. I mean, we mentioned earlier, a lot of people don't value bet often enough, right? So if they're not value betting often enough, they could just have aces. And you don't want to be bluffing when your opponent could just have aces or ace, king, right? So in this scenario, we're going to call. River's a 4. This player checks. This player bets 60. Like I said, we're completely done with this hand. We are not running a big bluff. I think a lot of people also get in their minds that when they're playing 250 big blinds deep, that they have to run big bluffs whenever they have the opportunity. And to be fair, if you're looking from, again, game theory optimal point of view, you should bluff sometimes. And maybe this is a hand to bluff with. In reality, the best hand to bluff with here may be a hand like a 10. Like 10, what would be a good bluff? 10-8? 10-8, if we had 10-8, that would be okay. Really, you don't want to block your opponent's potential bluffs. So even though queen high has no chance to win, that doesn't mean you need to be bluffing with this hand. You want to be bluffing with hands that block your opponent's betting range, or you want to block your opponent's calling range after they bet and you raise, which here would be like pocket tens, right? Or king 10. So you want to have a 10 in your hand that also does not block their bluffs. And their bluffs would be, I guess that's fine. If they have ace jack, they're probably not even betting here like this. Anyway, it's a rather convoluted scenario, but we are not bluffing here ever, is essentially what it amounts to. Against players in small stakes games, when they're betting here, even for $60, we're just giving it to them. We're not going to attempt to bluff. Yes, they could have like king 8, king 9 or something and then fold to a raise, but they can have it, right? We got okay odds on the flop. Let's go back, right? Notice we were getting good enough odds on the flop. We're about 20% to win, and those were the odds. Same story on the turn. We're about 20% to win. Those are the odds. So we've done perfectly fine here. If we get there on the river, do we shove? If this guy bet $60 on a 9 river or an ace river, I would raise not all in probably, because against a lot of these players, if you raise all in, they will fold. So if they bet, let's say $60, make it $160. And then you're going to get paid a lot of the time. Now, I do understand a bigger raise has to get called way less often because you're putting in less money whenever you're making it smaller, which means that you don't win as much when you get called. But again, I don't think a lot of people like calling off $400 at 1-2 no limit. Maybe I'm wrong. You all can tell me. But for the most part, when you're playing deep stack cash games, it seems like most of the pots are played for medium or small amounts. And when a lot of money goes in the pot, it's usually just like 2 nut hands. And in this scenario, given the way the opponents have played, it's just no way the opponent has the nuts. Now you may say, well, should we jam then if the opponents are only going to call with the nuts? I mean, it may be profitable, but again, going back to the protect your stack idea, it's quite risky and it's very, very difficult to find out, right? But hey, if you're playing a game where people will bet the river like this for $60 with stuff like a king and then fold it to a shove, hey, shove, it's free money, right? Anyway, we fold here. Look at that, funny king 9 bet. Not a good value bet at all. And interestingly enough, if we did jam here, maybe we do get the folds. But that's not the world we're living in this time. So those are the 3 lessons. Don't be afraid to value bet, protect your stack, and understand how similar situations differ. And now, before I get to your questions, I want to tell you about what I've been working on for a long time. It's Poker Coaching Premium. So you may ask, what is Poker Coaching Premium? Poker Coaching Premium is all of this. It is a new tier of pokercoaching.com, which I know many of you already love. You've all told me that it's been helping your game immensely. One of my students just the other day took 12th place in the seniors tournament at the World Series. He almost won. We have one of my students who won $1.3 million on Party Poker last year. So we're turning out some pretty good students, and I'm happy to see those great results. I've been working hard to help all of you. So what do Poker Coaching Premium members get? Well, they get access to my new Cash Game Masterclass. I've been working on this for quite a while, and it's finally ready. It's ready to go. I've shown a few people it, and they are loving it. Also, over 70 classes covering pre-flop, post-flop, special situations, and more. And we're going to be adding at least one new class every month. And it's probably going to be more than that. I mean, really, anytime you all tell me to make a video, to make anything to help you all, when you all send me a question, I make a video about it. And these are what the classes are, right? These are me explaining specific situations to all of you so that you can better your poker game. Also, you all know how we've been doing webinars with Alex Fitzgerald, Matt Affleck, and Evan Jarvis over the last few months. Well, many of those are going to be for Poker Coaching Premium members. We've been testing them with everyone to see if they like it. They love it. And sorry, but all those are not going to be available to everyone anymore going forward, but they're available to Poker Coaching Premium members. And I know you all love the quizzes, so we're making even more hand quizzes just for premium members. Of course, if you're a Poker Coaching member, nothing's going to change for you. Everything's going to be as is. You're still going to have all of the quizzes, over 500 of them now. Also, the homework challenge coaching webinars, they're still going to be there. But this is more. If you really want to take your game to the next level, that is what Poker Coaching Premium is. So, what is the Cash Game Masterclass? Here are all of the topics, 29 lessons. So, what are they? Here they are. We discuss things like equity, ranges. We discuss how to play against limpers. We discuss how to play against raisers, right? We discuss the flop. This video here is perhaps the best thing I've ever made. This little video right here doesn't look very, it looks kind of innocuous. But really, it discusses when to bet and how much to bet in essentially every scenario. And then we have a nice big summary of it. And we also discuss the turn and the river, the exact same scenarios. So it really does explain to you a framework. I know all of you tell me that you love the framework we presented at pokercoaching.com in the homework challenges to let you know actually when you should be betting and when you should be checking. And it does depend on things like range advantage, nut advantage, position, and other factors, right? We also discuss shallow stacked play in depth. We discuss deep stacked play in depth. We discuss short-handed play, straddle pots, bankroll management, and a few other topics like tells, mindset, etc. So that's the Cash Game Masterclass. That is just included in Poker Coaching Premium. Also, there's a new class every month. Like I said, the classes are typically deep dives on very specific topics. If you are an Inner Circle member, some of the strategy sessions have become classes. So each class is about 30 minutes long. I know I'm presenting another class just on Friday where someone asked, how do you play after someone raises and you call with a 15 big blind stack? And we're going to be going through 4 examples of situations, one where you're the raiser and someone calls, one where someone raises and you call in position, one where you're out of position, et cetera, going through our range and breaking that scenario down and discussing how to go about playing that kind of tricky spot. So there are new classes every month. Here's what the classes look like. As you see, we have pre-flop, post-flop, specific hands, technical skills, adjustments to various scenarios. We discuss finances, specific hand reviews, and coaching webinars. So very briefly, pre-flop, here are some concepts that are in there. And like I said, we're adding more all the time. We discuss 3 betting concepts, defending multi-way, small blind strategy, something that gives players fits. We discuss new plays that I'm adding into my arsenal, how to crush limpers, and many, many other things. Post-flop, same story, right? When to continuation bet and how much. When to continuation bet based on board texture. When to raise the flop with top pair, right? When to lead. I know a lot of you love Alex Fitzgerald, and he loves leading, and we discuss leading a little bit more in depth. We discuss playing some specific hands like sets, leveraging your stacks so that you can get the whole stack in, and all of that. Specific hands, how to play draws, how to play small pairs. We're going to load this out eventually. Poker Coaching Premium is still, and we're going to add to it for forever. We have technical skills, how to think in terms of hand ranges. We discuss increasing aggression, pot odds, side pot math, stuff like that. Various adjustments. You all know that I love discussing how to play fundamentally sound, but the way you really make all the money is by adjusting to the mistakes your opponents are going to make. And the adjustment category goes through tons and tons and tons of adjustments to beat overly aggressive players, maniacal players, tight players, passive players, how to play with shallow stacks, right? How to play with various tournament structures, and many, many more. We just have a section on finances because I know lots of people have big problems with money. Like I said, we have the Bankroll Bible at jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll if you want a taste of the bankroll medicine. But we discuss money issues. We discuss not making deals. We discuss seat selection. We discuss the optimal buy-in size. Someone here in the chat asked me, when do you reload in a cash game, or how do you know when to reload? Well, we discuss all of these things here. We also have a video I made with Mike Sexton a while back. Watch once you've won $1 million. It's a video I made with him in the Bahamas. We put that out for all of you. You all loved it. And here it is, right? Most of these videos are not publicly available, but a few of them I thought were amazing, and I put them in here because the one I made with Mike Sexton, watch once you have won $1 million, is highly valuable. I wish I had that information before I won $1 million. I'd probably have more money. Actually, I know I would. All right, we have lots and lots of hand reviews, including hands from my Montreal deep run, hands from a $1,000 buy-in tournament that I won recently. We analyze a few typical hands. We've discussed my World Series hands. And then my favorite part, where I learn a ton, are the coaching webinars. We have 2 coaching webinars by Fader Holtz. You all know him. He's one of the biggest winners in the game. We have a mindset Q&A and also Essential World Series of Poker strategies, where we go through essentially everything Fedor thinks you need to know to crush the World Series. And I don't know anyone who's crushed the World Series harder than Fedor has. He's played almost none, and he's taken second in the one drop. He had a deep run in the main event. He had a deep run in a few other tournaments. And look, this is where I really learn a lot. You have to realize, I make this content because I want this content, right? And I'm happy to share it with all of you. We also have webinars by Matt Affleck, who is a great cash game player, also a fantastic tournament player. And we've done quite a few webinars with him. All of these will be available in Poker Coaching Premium. We also have the webinars by Evan Jarvis. He discusses position, aggression, and hand selection. These are his triple threat. And he is always discussing these things, and they are very, very valuable. And we have Alex Fitzgerald, the Assassinato. The Assassinato, look, I probably taught almost more people than anyone else in the world. But if there is one person who has taught more people to succeed at poker long-term than me, it is Alex Fitzgerald, which is why I wanted to work with him. And fortunately, he's happy to work with me too. So we're going to have more and more webinars by these players, and we're going to continue loading that out for Poker Coaching Premium members. So that's what Poker Coaching Premium is. They get access to the new masterclass, which I'm telling you is like the best thing I've ever made. Also, over 70 classes, including all of those scenarios, pre-flop, post-flop, specific situations, and more, with new classes added every month. And that really is a lot of the value to this, is that we're going to continue building it out. If you do sign up to Poker Coaching Premium, realize that there's essentially infinite content, but I want this to be a database of everything you could possibly need to know to succeed at poker. That way, hey, you have a question, log into Poker Coaching Premium, search it, and get it. So, what else have we added? We're adding the new live training webinar every month. Again, more additional content if you are really trying to take your game to the next level, and additional quizzes. And if you are a Poker Coaching member already and you don't want to upgrade, realize that nothing at all is changing for you. You're still getting the webinar, some of the webinars every month by the other coaches, which, completely added for free to all of you. And again, we do our best to make sure that everyone is taken care of, because I realize everyone does not have a lot of time to study poker. So some people just want to do the quizzes, for example. And I know, because I have the information, that a lot of you don't get through all 500 quizzes. So go there and get to work. So all of you are asking me, how much is it? I don't know yet. It's coming on June 27th. You all have to wait 2 days. You can go to pokercoaching.com/premium. You'll see a countdown there. We will be launching it right there, right then. And I'm excited for it. If you want to make sure you are the first to know about it, you can get on the email list right there. So let's now get to some of your questions. If you're a current member, can you upgrade to premium? Absolutely. Great Twitter pic of me and my boys. Thank you very much. I like my boys. And they like playing. Let's see. The masterclass is great. Mike had early access to it. I'm glad that you are enjoying it. David says, you play 1 cent, 2 cent online. You find success at that level. Does that indicate that you will be successful at 1-2 or 1-3 live on the strip? Probably. I mean, I understand 1 cent, 2 cent is about as low as you can go. So what I would tell you to do is move up a little bit, right? Realize that if you're playing 1 cent, 2 cent, you might as well play 2 cent, 5 cent, or 10 cent, 25 cent. And then you will get a much better indication of whether or not you actually will be successful if you go to play against players who are playing for larger amounts of money live. I don't know, because I don't play 1 cent, 2 cent, but my fear is that 1 cent, 2 cent may play a whole lot like a play money game. If it's like a play money game, it's not the same. So I would just tell you, put in an additional $50 on the site and play a little bit bigger. Let's see. Yeah, if you all are ever in Vegas, make sure you come say hi to me. I don't really care when you do it. I want to meet all of you. So come say hi. Am I still in Vegas? I'm not at the moment, but I return on the 30th. We had to come home and make sure I take care of my family. You always got to take care of your family. Let's see. What's the biggest difference between high stakes and low stakes? I mean, really, players play better. As players play better, you have to play better. And that's it, right? If your opponents make lots of mistakes, you're going to make more money. If your opponents don't make as many mistakes, you're going to make less money. In general, good player or players at higher stakes games have studied the game a little bit more. They're not going to make just humongous mistakes, right? And that's it. Let's see. Do I think you have no business in a poker room until you know how to do the math? Maybe. I absolutely do not know. I mean, it depends on how well you are faring against your current opponents, right? If your opponents are not good at all, then you don't actually have to be all that much better than them, right? All you have to do is be better than your opponents. So if your opponents are completely oblivious to some extent, well, then you don't actually have to be all that good. Louis Philippe says, you're hyped for Poker Coaching Premium. The structure looks great. Well, we made it for people just like you, Louis Philippe. Louis Philippe works hard. He's in my little coffee every morning. If you all did not know, I have a show Monday, Wednesday, Friday called A Little Coffee when I'm not traveling. And Louis Philippe is there almost every day. So Louis Philippe is doing great work. Mark says, people generally are more balanced at the high stakes across the board. And I generally agree. What's the best medium stakes cash game room? You want to play, well, first off, I don't know what medium stakes means to you. But if you want to play something like 2-5, I would tell you to probably play at Caesars, maybe MGM if you can. You want to play where the pros are not. Will the Masterclass be available for purchase outside of upgrading to Premium? No, at least not for the meantime. It is only part of Poker Coaching Premium. And, you know, we've been kicking around ideas to where we don't want to have to try to sell individual products. Maybe we make everything I make going forward part of Poker Coaching Premium. We're going to figure that out. And you all, hopefully, will give me nice, good feedback. Let's see. If you memorize poker information, you do not know how to play the hand. So that's someone saying, is that what I think about that statement? I mean, you definitely need to understand ranges and how ranges interact. And in theory, you could just memorize a GTO solver and you're going to just crush everyone. So depends on how good your brain is. Let's see. You find that in small stakes, unless you bet very large, most of these guys will continue and you find yourself getting sucked out on. Well, don't pay people off, right? And also understand which cards are bad for you. Very rarely is a particular card always going to outdraw you or something like that, right? And like, for example, say it's King 10, 6, 2. You're not so worried about 7 coming, right? You're not so worried about a 4 coming. Yes, every once in a while you lose, but you're more so worried about the hands that complete the draws. Is understanding the other player's range important when playing GTO? Yes, because you have to understand how the ranges interact, right? I mean, it's not just as easy as say, always bet your best made hands in your draws, because there are certainly times where you want to be betting with everything. You want to be betting with everything because that's how, whenever you have the range advantage, that implies you know your range is stronger than your opponent's. So you need to be able to watch or be able to understand your opponent's range. Are we doing any more meetups? Well, we have a breakfast, but it's already sold out. We sent out an email for that a while ago. But I will be doing a book signing, a time or two at the D&B book booth, and also just come find me. I'm around. Do I think $2,000 is enough to bring to Vegas for a 10-day span to play 1-2 and $200 buy-in tournaments? I mean, I don't know what that means. It depends on how aggressively you're playing. It depends on how well you play. You see people opening to 7.5 to 10 big blinds pre-flop it. Your no-limit games. Is that too large? Yeah, pretty much always, unless your opponents are just the worst calling stations in the world. How do you adjust to these big open raises? I believe we discussed that. Do we discuss that in the masterclass? I actually know I do. Is there a specific title for this? Let's see. Well, I definitely discussed it. It's somewhere in here. Essentially, you just want to play a lot tighter, because if your opponents are raising huge, then they're essentially risking a lot of money to win what? The blinds, right? Almost nothing. And that's it. If they're risking a ton of money to win nothing, you can just sit there and only play good hands. Any update to Modern Poker Theory? It just got sent to the printer today. Should be out in any day now. Poker's changed a lot over the last 10 years. Will win rates continue to change forever? Yeah, win rates get lower over time. Can you rewatch these webinars? Yes, all these webinars that we have been making are available for you to rewatch. They will all be in Poker Coaching Premium. Some of them will be up on YouTube and in Poker Coaching. By the way, whenever you log into Poker Coaching in a few days after we launch, there will be some of this content unlocked for you. So if you want a trial to Poker Coaching Premium, well, you pretty much already have it available, because we will be, many of these modules will be unlocked and ready for you to watch whenever you like. So it's kind of like a free trials built in. We're just giving you more and more content added, which we do our best to do. Mark, who has access to the cash game masterclass already, said he did the first lesson earlier today. The example about stack sizes with pocket sevens and how it changes is excellent. We look forward to going through the rest of the classes. Good. Yeah, I mean, we discuss how you need to be playing differently based on stack sizes. That's just in the introduction section, right? Doesn't even look like we're discussing how to play against various stack sizes, but hey, we go through multiple hands just right there in that section. All right, let's see. As a woman, it seems like you get called by men all the way to the river on their weak draws when you are aggressively betting on all the streets. Is there any psychology behind this? Well, maybe some people don't like being pushed around by a female player. I don't know. You definitely need to understand what your image is, though, and how your image affects your opponents. Like if you're an older person who looks really, really nitty, maybe your opponents are going to fold too much to you. In that case, you need to be bluffing a lot. If you look like a lunatic, then maybe your opponents are going to be calling a lot. I don't know. You always have to figure out exactly how your image impacts your opponents. I actually discussed that in the other topic section and throughout this whole masterclass, I believe. You bought your Poker Coach app and every hand pack. Is that Poker Coaching Premium? No, that is Insta Poker, I believe. That's very, very different. Again, Poker Coaching Premium is coming soon, June 27th. Again, go to pokercoaching.com/premium to get on the list. All right, live cash game question. 1-2 no limit. You have aces in the cutoff, 2 limpers. You make it 15, flop comes 9-8-5. I don't know how many people called. They check you bet 30. You may just want to check here. You do not have the nut advantage. You also may not even have the range advantage. Maniac shoves for 110. Well, easy call here once you bet 30 into 45. But this is a scenario on 9-8-5 where you completely lack the nut advantage. And when you lack the nut advantage, you want to do a lot of checking. Do I recommend finishing all the quizzes before you do this? Well, realize that Poker Coaching Premium is different than the homework, and Poker Coaching Premium will help you do your homework way, way better. Does the Zoom format change any part of your strategy? You just have to learn to play more fundamentally sound, is what it amounts to. Let's see. If you bought a year membership to Poker Coaching, can you upgrade? Will adjustments be made? Yes, we will figure out all the billing issues. Do not worry about that. Let's see. A lot of you are talking about these big preflop raise sizes. I mean, you have to understand that big sizes feel nice in general whenever they work. The problem is when they fail, you lose a ton. And, for all I know, you may find that in your games, if you 2.5x pot it every single street, your opponents may fold literally everything. If they're going to fold bottom sets and stuff like that, then sure, keep doing it. But you have to be very careful with the idea of I'm going to bet a lot to win a little, because whenever it fails, you end up losing a lot. And the thing is like you are going to succeed very frequently. Like imagine you're playing roulette and you bet on 34 numbers out of the however many there are, 37, 38, whatever it is. Well, you win almost every time, but when you lose a boatload, and it more than makes up for the wins when you do win. Do 1, 2, 1, 3, and 2, 5 all play the same? I mean, I'm sure there are slight differences, but it depends more on the opponents at the table as opposed to the actual stake. If you get angle shot by someone, what is the etiquette? I mean, you should not take anything at the poker table personally, and also make it to where you cannot get angle shot. So many people leave themselves open to get crushed, and you really, really, really do not want to open yourself up to get crushed by people who do shady things. So, like, for example, never throw your hand in the muck until the pot has been awarded to you, right? It's an easy one. Because some people will do things like say, nice hand, you got me, and then the other guy will just throw their hand in the muck and say, all right, I got you. But no, that does not mean you win the pot. Anytime you do get angle shot, anytime anything weird happens at the table, realize it is a learning opportunity. And You need to learn from it. You heard the rake on the West Coast is so high it's hard to win at 1-2. Well, on the West Coast. In California, I think it's definitely beatable. Really, you want the rake to be something like, if you're playing 1-2, something like $5 per hand or less is fine. But ideally, you just want the rake to be as low as possible. If the rake's like $20 a hand or something, you're clearly not going to win. What is an angle shot? An angle shot is when someone does something shady that induces you to make an error. Dean basically says, be observant, you can use it against them. That is absolutely true. What's the best room in Vegas for 1-2? I don't know. I don't play a whole lot of 1-2. But, like I said, you want to play where the pros don't play. So I imagine places like Caesars or MGM or Bally's are going to be fantastic. I actually played at Bally's on a company retreat. I took my team there, and we played at Bally's for a little bit, and it was fantastic. So Bally's is a good one if you want to play 1-2. Is there a difference between shorthanded and full ring games? Yes, and we discussed that thoroughly in the masterclass. Over 80 tournaments, you have 24% in the money and 154% return on investment. Good. I mean, you're asking, is it okay to take a little bit of money to Vegas to play? I mean, the question is, do you care if you lose all of your money? Because, let's get real, if you're going to go play $200 buy-in tournaments with $2,000, you're probably not going to come back with a whole lot of money because you're only going to cash 2 or 3 of them. What's my view on 2x raises? 2x raises are great, especially when your opponents fold too much. Angelo says, I'm a great communicator. Thank you. I do my best. Should you be using Alex Fitzgerald exploitative adjustments, such as not trying to barrel the turn and river as often, since people fold less often at smaller stakes games? Well, the exploitative adjustment is to just value bet more often if your opponent are calling stations, right? How's Mirage 1-2? I have no idea. I've never played 1-2 at Mirage. I've only played a $10,000 buy-in tournament at Mirage, and I won it. So I love the Mirage. How many hours is the masterclass? I'm not exactly sure. I think it's something like 7 or 8. It seems long, but it's actually quite concise. Do I review students' notes and provide discussion feedback? If I did that, that would take me a huge amount of time. I actually had something called the Inner Circle, which we may or may not be winding down, where people could get online and ask me questions for 15 minutes, like a call-in, I don't even know what's the right call. It's like office hours to some extent. And it takes a lot of time, infinite time. But yes, Mark says he loves the Inner Circle. I love the Inner Circle too, but it eats all my time. Don, if you're an Inner Circle member, you should already have access to all of this. Is the masterclass only available for Poker Coaching Premium? That is accurate. How do I feel about playing small ball? I think you should play good, fundamentally sound poker. Sometimes that means small pots. Sometimes that means big pots. Often it means small pots with your marginal made hands and your garbage. And it means big pots with your premium made hands and your draws. Where do the pros play in Vegas? Aria, Bellagio, Venetian, Wynn. There you go. Don't play there. All those places are the best rooms, though. So go figure. Matt says, you see a lot of people using a min betting strategy post-flop. Yeah, if you have a range advantage, you want to be using small bet sizes. We discussed that thoroughly in the masterclass. How do you play when short stacked? When should you add chips? I mean, depends on your bankroll, depends on your scenario. What are you trying to accomplish, right? What's the main difference between 1-2 and 1-3? Well, not a whole lot, besides the blinds are slightly different. In my experience, following the tours, are the cash games more beatable than normal when, I guess you're asking when the tours are there? Yes, they absolutely are, because a lot of recreational players follow around the poker tour and want to gamble. What's a good strategy to implement in unlimited rebuy World Series events? Just play normal poker. Whenever you're playing a re-entry tournament, it is the exact same thing as a regular poker tournament. The only difference is if you bust, you get to play it again. If you're going to add on, do it on the button. Yep, that is very good advice, because then if you add on the button, you get to play in position with more money, whereas out of position, you get to play with less money. Are live poker cash games more beatable than online? Absolutely, because we discussed this earlier. Online players typically play better. Do I know anyone who's moved abroad purely to get better by playing against tougher competition? I don't think that's necessarily a good idea. I think you would, if you were working with a small bankroll right now, you are almost certainly better off just playing in games you can beat and winning more money. How long can you watch the masterclass? Listen, if you're a Poker Coaching Premium member, as long as you are a member, you have access to all of this stuff. The masterclass, the 70 classes, the classes I add all the time, the additional quizzes we're giving on a regular basis, etc., etc. Everyone asking questions about their specific membership tier. Understand I can't address all of those now. How do you become a member? Get on the list. We'll email you in a day or two. Any cash games will I be playing while I'm in Vegas? Nope, not this time. Life is hectic. Are the Rio cash games good? Yep. Why do you think people who play online are better than live? Because they have significantly more experience. Because they played many, many more hands. Also, they have to learn to play fundamentally sound because they lack many of the traits that live players can have that give them an edge, like being able to read people, for example, right? Just based on appearance and whatnot. Also, people who play online typically are more serious, and they really just put in more time, and they play more hands, and the bad players lose quicker, which puts them out of the game. Whereas the good players are good enough to beat the very bad players who went broke, and if they're still around, they're good enough to beat all the other good players who didn't go broke in the first round. So essentially, the good players win all of the money faster online. Is there a chat question or chat box? Yeah, this is it. How do you see a value bet? How do you know if someone is value betting you? I mean, learn to play well, right? I mean, but at the end of the day, you're not going to know if your opponent's value betting you or not, if they're value betting or bluffing. So you need to learn to play fundamentally sound, so it doesn't matter what they do. Any recommendations on straddle games? I have a large class on straddle games in the masterclass. You play 1, 2 to 2, 5. How much should you bring if you're going to go play for a week? Again, it depends on your standard deviation. You should know the answer to these questions, right? This is like, go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. Go there, read, study up. What's the difference between skill levels between 2.5 and 5.10? Again, the stakes are irrelevant. Everyone, the stakes you play are completely irrelevant. I've played 1-2 no limit games that were super tough, and I've played 200, 400 games that were the softest game you could imagine. So the stakes are irrelevant. What matters is who are you playing against. Is all that matters. What's the proper bankroll for 510? Go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. In Vegas, you experience a different way of straddling on the button. Yeah, Mississippi straddle. There's all sorts of straddles. We discussed that in the straddling section. When you play cash games, do you wait for the weekends? When I play cash games, I play whenever I'm available. Ideally, you want to play in games where the games are softest. Assuming you have other things to do, right? Like say you get to play poker for 20 hours a week, just play the 20 softest hours, which are probably going to be the weekends and nighttime. But if you want to play poker 70 hours a week, well, there aren't that many hours on those days. It might be good just to put a link to the bankroll here. Yeah, that's probably a good idea, but we're about done. What's your advice for someone who's running bad for a long period of time? Confirm you're actually running bad. If you're actually running bad for 6 months playing live poker, well, sorry. I mean, the advice for someone who's running bad is get over it, which is a little bit harsh. But if you are definitively a winning player, which is actually very difficult to know in live poker, because you have to look at how you are losing very specifically. Like if you're just losing literally every all-in when you get it in good, then whatever. Like I had one summer in Vegas where I lost like every big all-in. I played something like 15 big all-ins at 25, 50 and higher no limit, and I lost like 12 of them. And I was ahead or flipping in almost all of them. So it's like, well, what are you going to do? You're just going to lose. But if you're like breaking even in your big hands and you're still just losing all the other hands, then you're probably doing something wrong. Are you hesitant to call the clock? Nope. You should call the clock if someone is out of line. Kyle says, you're playing 510 at Bellagio. Noticed a lot of squeezing on the button. You think it's appropriate to 3-bet a mix of hands like suited gappers? Yeah, absolutely. Go to pokercoaching.com/charts to get a general idea of what I'm recommending 3-betting. And suited connectors, or like the junkier suited connectors, are very often in there. Let's see. You always get nervous before getting into cash games. Any tips on remaining calm? Biological conditioning. Get in there and get experience. Do we have any tips for breathing? Same thing. Just get in there and get comfortable. Yes, you're going to be nervous when you do anything new in your life, and that is okay, right? It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to get excited, but if you do something often enough, eventually it will become very, very normal to you. I mean, people ask me, like, how can you take the bad beats they see me take sometimes? And it's like, it's normal. Sometimes you're going to lose, right? So who cares? Like that summer where I lost 12 out of 15 big all-ins. Probably cost me like $150K or something like this, right? And what are you going to do? You can't win the hand, right? You get it all in and you lose. And I know what I signed up for. And that's it. So understand the game that you signed up for. So many people don't actually understand that you are going to experience variance in poker. What are mindset differences between cash and tournaments? Well, a whole lot. They're very different games. It's important to realize that the strategies are often sometimes very similar, but they're often very, very different. I mean, in cash games, you can just quit whenever you want. I mean, that alone is significant. How long did I play cash before I moved up to the higher stakes? Whenever I started playing cash, I jumped right in at 5 to no limit. I already had a decent amount of success playing online. Actually, to be fair, first cash game I ever played was 25-50 no limit online on Party Poker. All my friends told me that the game was super soft. This was 10 or 12 years. No, this was, 15 years ago now. I went from playing like $1,000 buy-in sit and goes to the $5,000 buy-in 25-50 game. I crushed it. And shortly after that, Party Poker closed to American. So that was a big bummer. But, and then whenever I started playing cash games live, I started at 510, was making about $120 an hour and moved up to 1020, 25-50, whatever. Really, whenever the games were good, I would play bigger. How old am I? I am 34. Getting old. Can premium membership take one to a pro level? I mean, look, in my opinion, if you just study all of my free content out there, it can take you to becoming a great pro. I mean, one of my friends, the poker coaching member who actually just signed up to poker coaching right before this happened, who won $1.3 million, he was just studying mostly the free stuff, right? And that's how it goes. I mean, if you are willing to do a lot of digging and you are willing to study, there's plenty of free stuff out there that will get you there. But I wanted Poker Coaching Premium to be able to consolidate all of my absolute best information, give it to you all in one place, have it laid out very cleanly, very neatly, so that you could find and study exactly what you want to study whenever you want to study it, as opposed to having to, go through tons of videos on YouTube or search for very specific weekly poker hand episodes or whatever, right? I mean, I put out tons of content because I know that eventually, whenever you really are ready to take your game to the next level, the cost of poker coaching, which was $39 a month, is going to be insignificant. And you're going to go there and you're going to be thrilled because of that price, because you're going to be making hundreds or thousands of dollars a month. $40 is nothing, right? And that's what we're hoping happens with Poker Coaching Premium, where it's an even better resource. And we're just going to continue adding to it as the members tell me what they want me to make. What's the top 3 things to learn when you start? Learn how to think in terms of hand ranges. You have a lot of work to do before you get a personal coach. Well, fortunately, Poker Coaching Premium is not a personal coach. I charge $500 per hour for that, and I have to turn people down. So people realize the value, and that's really it. I mean, I think a lot of people don't quite understand that private poker coaching is actually one of the absolute best values you can get. I mean, whenever I was young, 18 years old, I paid a guy $500 an hour to teach me for 10 hours playing sit and goes. And my return on investment went up about 2 or 3%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it ended up making me an extra $5,000 per month for the next 3 years. So I don't even know what that is. What is that? That's $60,000 a month. So it made me $180,000 spending that $5,000, right? And that's exactly what happens, because you are trading often a pretty big amount of money in exchange for the coach consolidating everything that you specifically need to learn and handing it to you on a silver platter. And I realize that everyone can't afford $500 a month, $500 per hour coaching. That's why I made Poker Coaching Premium to be like that. So you could search exactly what you need, right? I want to be able to give you exactly what you need to make you a significantly better poker player. And to be fair, most people only have 5 or 10 things they do really wrong. And if you fix those, they're going to be pretty good. Let's see. Will Poker Coaching Premium go over software? I know Matt Affleck was doing that just the other day in a webinar that he did where he was going over his World Series hands. He was going over it using many of the solvers. Let's see. We have a way to sort out older content that becomes outdated. Well, I hope you all realize this, but all of my outdated content I do not publish anymore. I take it offline. Someone was asking me for this book series. I had a 14-part book series. They're like, where is this 14-part book series? Well, I thought it was kind of obsolete because back then I only shoved or folded. I didn't know how to limp or min raise whenever I was shallow stacked, but I've since learned if you use only a shove or a reshove chart, you are making an egregious error, especially when you have 12 big blinds or 15 big blinds or 20 big blinds. If you think you can blindly follow a chart and never deviate and win a ton of money, you are fooling yourself. You're really probably making a lot of errors because your options are not only shove or fold, you also get to call. Learning to call is very, very important. And don't trick yourself into playing poorly. Let's see. What's a pro level return on investment? It depends on the games, right? Depends on the scenarios. Let's see. Travis, I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. You're saying that should you play free roll tournaments or play for real money? I mean, it depends on how much you value your time, right? So our push fold app's not good. Push fold apps are great when you have about 8 big blinds or less. Besides that, nope. They will light your money on fire, assuming your opponents know how to play well. Like if your opponents are also just blindly shoving a shove or fold chart, if you learn how to play GTO, which includes limping from the button in the small blind and min raising from the earlier seats, you're just going to print money. But no, if you go and you download an app, especially an app that makes you think that you can play a specific way after someone has entered the pot, like if someone raises in front of you, charts are relevant. They'll give you a good baseline, but they go out the window. Because just imagine you're playing against a tight player. Tight player opens. Well, you certainly don't want to be jamming a quote-unquote GTO strategy, game theory optimal strategy, because you're going to get called every time and you're going to lose your money. Even the float the turn app. Yeah, float the turn app is great. The push fold app when you have about 8 to 10 big blinds or less. Don't be using it from, especially the early positions for 15 big blinds or more. You're just going to be lighting it up because you have more options than only shove or fold. It's important to understand how to use the information that you are given. And someone mentioned the shove or fold programs. I mean, those are some of the ones that are easiest to mess up. How can you avoid being overcommitted by the river with big draws? I mean, you have to learn to fold whenever you're not getting the right odds. Do you prefer an 8 to 5 job? No, I do not want an 8 to 5 job. I like what I do. I work 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. every day, basically. I like my 12-hour day job, 7 days a week. Do you still take notes? Yep, I do. I've gotten a little bit better at taking them in my phone, so I take them in my phone most of the time, but on notepads faster. If this is the case, why include 10 plus big blind more in the shove or fold app? Because sometimes it's relevant. But for the most part, it is not. Also, just because information exists does not mean it is the GTO strategy. No one has said GTO strategy and a shove fold chart, or the shove fold charts are GTO. They say they are GTO in non-payout implication scenarios if your only options are shove or fold. But as computers have gotten better, we now know that you should not be only shoving or folding, even for like 11 big blinds. You should be limping sometimes or min raise sometimes. You take notes on cash. Absolutely. All right, so that's it. We got through most of the questions. I hope you all enjoyed this webinar. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in Poker Coaching Premium. That will be launching on June 27th, 2019. I want to thank you again all very much for being here. To reiterate, the 3 cash game lessons you must understand. Don't be afraid to value bet. Protect your stack and understand how similar situations differ, because If you think generic situations are the same, you are, again, lighting your money on fire. You must learn to think for yourself. And really, that's the purpose of Poker Coaching Premium, to give you all of the information you need to be able to make good decisions on your own. Thanks a lot. Good luck in your games, and I'll talk to you next time.